So good evening, everybody. I'm Martha MacCallum in New York, and this is the story. So let's take you back here for a moment. In 2018, in the governor's election in Georgia, Stacey Abrams lost the race to Brian Kemp, who's now the governor. That was 758 days ago, and she has still yet to concede the race.
Let's be clear. This is not a speech of concession, because concession means to acknowledge an action is right, true, or proper. As a woman of conscience and faith, I cannot concede that.
And her supporters never, ever gave up that fight. In fact, they still refer to her as the legitimate governor of Georgia. She even participated in the governor's panel with all the people who actually are governors during the DNC. So Stacey Abrams has spent the last couple of years not only casting doubt on the results of the election that she lost, but also working furiously to change the system in Georgia in ways that she hopes will drive up votes for Democrats. And it worked in the national election this time around. So this week, we learned, though, that one of the groups that she helped to launch, called the New Georgia Project, is one of the groups that is under investigation now by the Secretary of State, who is looking for any instances of groups that tried to register out of state or dead voters to vote in the presidential election. This is a state where the president lost to the former Vice President Joe Biden by 0.2%. Very, very slim margin. So you can bet that for both sides, they know that every vote is going to count and matter a lot in this Georgia Senate race. So President Trump is heading there. He will be there on Saturday for a rally for Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue as they contend those Senate races. In many ways, the leaders of the turnout machine in Georgia is going to be President Trump and Stacey Abrams. That is why today the Trump side sort of began to turn the way they were looking at these two so-called advocates of the president's fight about the election. Attorneys Lin Wood and Sidney Powell have been telling Republicans in Georgia on the ground not to vote on January 5th or before, when voting starts.
I would encourage all Georgians to make it known that you will not vote at all until your vote is secure.
Do not be fooled twice. This is Georgia. We ain't dumb. We're not going to go vote on January 5th in another machine made by China.
All right. So tonight we welcome Georgia Congressman Doug Collins. Congressman, good to have you here tonight. Thank you.
Martha, it's good to see you.
So there was a pretty, subtle shift in the way that the Trump team and his supporters and allies started to look at the situation after we saw that moment yesterday with Lin Wood and Sidney Powell on that stage exhorting people, Republicans in Georgia, not to vote in this election. So then we saw this tweet from the Trump war room saying Lin Wood has for decades voted for and donated to Democrats, including Barack Obama and David Perdue's 2014 opponent. Then Newt Gingrich, supporter of the president, chimed in. Lin Wood and Sidney Powell are totally destructive. Every Georgia conservative who cares about America must vote in the runoff. Their don't vote strategy will cripple America. What do you think about that?
Well, look, this is a very simple choice. If voters in Georgia, especially our conservatives and our Republicans who vote for Georgia, who vote for Trump, who like what's happened over the last 4 years, this is a vote about going forward and not going backwards. So we've got to have everybody turn out. There are issues with this election. I respect everybody. I've been one of the ones fighting. There's others fighting for this. We're filing suits. That's going through the process. But if Georgia Republicans and conservatives don't show up and vote, then there's no way that we keep these seats. And that's what's got to happen. Because I do not want to see Chuck Schumer become the leader in the Senate, in which we don't have just a change in the Senate, we have a reversion in this. If you want to see the tax cuts go away, you want to see these legislative victories that the president has made, then you've got to elect David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler, because if we don't, then it's a vote to say that for Trump voters, it's a vote not to keep what Trump has done. We've got to make that clear. This election is that important.
Let's talk about the dynamic and how it's changed. You heard the intro to this about Stacey Abrams and how she never conceded her election for the governor's race. And then, she and others have worked really hard to drive up the Democrat vote in Georgia. What is your assessment of how effectively they've done that? It seemed like it worked for that squeaker in the national election. And, is anything going to change in terms of the dynamic on January 5th?
Well, I think it's going to be determined dynamic. We've been shining a lot of sunshine and making, and asking hard questions to the Secretary of State. Why did they enter into a consent decree that for most of us who look at the election actually weakened the signature verification that we saw in Georgia? Actually, why did we go ahead and agree to sending an absentee ballot request to every registered voter in Georgia, no matter if the rolls or if their addresses, some of them actually got more than one vote?
Have either one of those things changed for the next election?
Yeah, we're not doing that. That's what we're doing. The issue now is we're seeing the signature ballots. We're actually asking still for an audit. I know that the governor's asked for that. But also at the same point in time, when you're actually now putting the pressure on to make sure these things are happening, we need to make sure that our elections offices and our Secretary of State are making sure these are fair elections. But I also have to say, Martha, while we're doing this, people cannot give up on this system, because right now we've got to turn our voters back out. Now, if Stacey Abrams has never conceded the governor's race, I don't know if I can call her a former governor, but here's the problem that she had. She worked to actually try and weaken these standards. She actually got into the consent decree that was signed by the state of Georgia into this thing that actually weakened this. But also they actually went out and encouraged their voters to use the absentee ballot system to make it work. That's what we saw in here. So for Republicans, it's time for us to also get back out and make sure that every voter that we have gets out to vote. If they can get to the polls, we want them at the polls.
All right,
if not, then we do it.
Let me ask you a simple question then.
Yeah.
The two things that you mentioned, the weakening of the signature match, will that be any different for this Senate election?
I think it's actually now is called attention to. We're going to actually have more. There's been discussion from the Secretary of State's office who's now investigating how these were actually done. I believe that there's going to be more scrutiny on it than we had in the last election.
But it's not going to be changed. I mean, you've got people start voting in a few days in Georgia. So I'm hearing that so far that rule has not changed. Is that correct? As of right now, has it changed?
No, it's not changed. And the problem is when do you change it? Because this is the issue. You're in the middle of an election cycle here. I would like to have seen the General Assembly have a chance to actually act on this. They did not. That's what we're in the middle of now with 6 weeks left to go.
It's a Republican-controlled General Assembly, correct?
It is.
So why wouldn't they act on this if they felt like it was, not handled correctly? And also, is everybody going to get a ballot just like they did last time, or do you have to apply for one and ask for one if you can't make it to the polls? Is that changed?
Yeah, nobody actually got a ballot. They got a request for a ballot sent out, and that's what the Democrats had asked for, because for people, and what we did see is we saw a lot of people who had never, hadn't voted in a long time actually use the absentee process. Look, the governor can call a special session, and the General Assembly could with 3/5 votes. They don't have 3/5 votes. The governor could call it. His excuse and his reason for not calling a special session was that no matter what they passed would not be effective for this campaign, because he believed that the courts would strike it down. Now, that is his reason for not doing it. There's a lot of people, though, that want to see this actually taken up. That's why we have lawsuits going on. That's why we're having to see if we can get this work. But right now, it is imperative that you take what we've been given and have turnout be the key in this race. In Georgia, that has always been the issue for Republicans, turning out in a special election. We've always done well in that. We've got to do that again, because the Democrats see the very real possibility of taking the Senate in this.
Well, I mean, and Lindsey Graham was here last night. He said, all you need in Georgia is for one person to verify a signature. Every signature on the mail-in ballot should be verified in a bipartisan way. Is that going to change in Georgia for the upcoming election?
At this point, that is not changing. That was part of this whole issue. That's why we've been talking so much about this consent decree, and why there's been so much scrutiny placed on the Secretary of State. Not in the sense of personal attack, but just simply say, why did we sign this, that actually now you can take any signature and match to the ballot. Also in Georgia, you have to, as we take this out, we have to, once they're separated from the envelopes, the ballot doesn't have a mark on it that would identify it back to the actual signature. So once they're separated, it makes it even harder. These are things that have to be corrected, but right now there are also things that we have to deal with in this next election.
Well, in some ways it makes you kind of understand why people are frustrated. When they go back in there to vote again, they feel like the same thing is going to happen to them again, since there's not been a concerted effort to change what they feel was wrong last time around. So, yeah, we're going to stay on it and watch it closely. Congressman, thank you. Good to have you here tonight.
Mark. All right, take care.